Three, two, one, here we go. Rainman's Take podcast. Observations on the world we live in. My take on current events and other topics of interest. Also interviews with some really cool people. So let's get the conversation going. Hey everybody, it's the Rain Man. I want to give a quick shout out to all of you watching today. Thank you very much. I know you're going to find this next episode thought-provoking. I love talking to people like Janet Sitchin, and I'm very interested in the subjects that we're going to be discussing today. And I know you will enjoy it too. So go ahead and hit the like button. And if you're new to Rain Man's Take, subscribe by pressing my logo in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And I'd love it if you could also watch the video to the end. This helps with the YouTube algorithm and helps me grow Rain Man's Take so we can continue bringing you great content in the future. So thanks again for being part of the Rain Man's Take community and enjoy this conversation with Janet Sitchin. All right, Janet Sitchin, welcome back. Thank you for joining me again.
Thank you for having me.
No, my pleasure. My pleasure. Yeah, it's actually been almost 2 years since you were on when we first talked. And so I appreciate you coming back on. And just, by way of a reintroduction, to Janet, Janet Sitchin is Zacharia Sitchin's niece. And, while he was alive and then, after he died in 2010, Janet sort of took over as kind of the administrator for, Zacharia's official website, which is Sitchin.com, and just sort of administration of all of the research that's on that website. And then just kind of, in general, just sort of keeping the research and the experiences that people have had with Zacharia while he was alive, keeping those things alive through the website. So Janet, thanks again for joining me today.
Thank you.
All right. So, why don't we just start real quick? Like I said, it's been a couple of years. So, is there anything new? Has anything kind of been going on with the website and kind of with I know that there's been a couple of new videos that you've posted, but tell us a little bit about what's been going on in the last couple of years.
So I haven't really done much with the website. So I'm sorry to everybody who probably tries to look at it. There isn't more. I should do more, but I have a full-time job and plus some. But one of my friends who was a friend of Zachariah's and went on some of the trips with him, and actually lives in the same area of New York that he did, started putting together some videos of the trips, and they're available. There are links on the website. I don't know, where they're actually hosted these days, but there are links on the website to get to them. And they're really very fascinating with the trips, and you kind of feel like you're right there with Zacharia again. So that's something that's happened in the last couple of years, and there probably are more of them. When he was alive, and unfortunately before I really knew that he was doing them, he used to do trips once or twice a year for about 10 years. He went to Israel, he went to Egypt, they went to Mexico and other places in Central America. He went to Greece and England and visited places like Stonehenge, went all over the place. And I think the ones that are available now are ones from Turkey, the videos, but he used to lead these tours. So he had groups of people who had read his work and wanted to go on the trips. And every night before they went to visit something, he had trip notes, and he would explain to everybody what they were going to see the next day. So when they went to a museum or they went to a site like Baalbek, he could explain, and they would have a better idea of what they were going to see. So that's what's in these videos. So they're really, really wonderful the way that they were done. They were done really well. And I'm only associated with it from the perspective of having the link on my site. Any monetary things or anything else about viewing the videos, which are not expensive to view. It's done by the other person, but they're really, anyone who's interested in my uncle's works would probably love seeing those videos.
Yeah, and again, it's Sitchin.com, and the link to those videos is basically right almost at the top. So as you scroll down from the top, you'll come across those tour videos as well. And while we're on the subject of his videos, one of my favorites was his, I guess it's probably one of his last ones, maybe, was his talk about why Jerusalem. Why was Jerusalem so important? And that to me, when I started reading all of his books and the Earth Chronicles, that's the one thing that there was always a big question: is why? What was so important about that one spot on Earth? And his lecture goes really deep into why that is, and I found that fascinating. Did you ever go to any of those places with him?
I didn't get to go on any of the trips with him because by the time I knew that he had done them, he had stopped doing them. So it was a shame, but because I would have loved to have been able to go on those with him.
Yeah. So that's great that they've been kept alive through the website. One of the things, kind of when I first started down the road reading his books, and then of course you get into the whole ancient alien theory, of which he was probably one of the first few guys that were really kind of talking in those terms based on his research into the Anunnaki and cuneiform tablets that were found in Mesopotamia. It also immediately seemed like the mainstream was all over him for pseudoscience and pseudo research. What was his sort of, and we're going to talk a little bit about how it seems to be, that doesn't seem to be as loud anymore. You're getting more and more people seem to be corroborating what he was saying. But when he was actually doing that, was there any sense that sort of thing was getting to him, or was that happening after he had died?
No, it happened from the very beginning, but he just didn't listen to that stuff, and he didn't respond to it. So if people tried to provoke him with those things, he just let it alone. I mean, he knew that what he was researching were facts, and he didn't write anything until he had, 10 pieces of facts to back them up. He didn't really want to say anything at all until he knew it was for sure something that he believed and was sure about. So he felt pretty comfortable with what he was putting out there, what he was saying, that it was based on what was in Sumerian texts or other ancient texts. And so if somebody didn't agree with him, fine, but he knew what he knew.
Yeah. So. And did he run that by a group of researchers or scholars, or what was sort of his way of vetting the information before he actually put it out there?
So a lot of it he just kept close to his chest. He didn't really share a lot of that, but he had a lot of people that were his advisors. If he needed information, he would talk to a lot of different people that he had as contacts, make new contacts, and get the right information and be able to corroborate it. So he wasn't necessarily saying to somebody, hey, here's my idea, what do you think? He was just asking about pieces of information that let him put the whole puzzle together.
Yeah. And one of the things I realized kind of as I was kind of going deeper into his work and others is the modern Bible that people read right now, the King James version, it's only been around for a couple hundred years, maybe 300 years, I think, the modern, and even that's been bastardized, for lack of a better word. I remember when I was in Iraq with the Marine Corps, they gave us, the military gives you these little kind of pocket Bibles, and after reading some of the things that Zacharia was talking about in terms of the old Hebrew Bibles and old Hebrew Old Testament versions, and then I look at my little pocket Bible, and it's like a kid's story, the way the language was, as opposed to what he was talking about. So And that's the one thing that I found fascinating, is that when he was younger, growing up and studying Hebrew, that's what they were reading, was the old Hebrew Bibles, correct?
Well, I'm not sure what he read in school, whether it was English or in Hebrew, because he was going to school under the British mandate. And so I think there was a combination. So his Bible studies class, I'm not sure which version they were reading, but because he did ask about the translation of the word Nephilim that was in Genesis 6, where it talks about, because it's translated as giants. And that was kind of his first spark on all of this, is he was in that class and he saw the word giants there. The line was, and there were giants upon the earth then and also afterwards. So he asked the teacher, well, why do they translate this word as giants when the Hebrew word is Nephilim, which comes from the root word nephal, which means to fall or to come down? And the teacher basically told him to, sit down and be quiet and not question it, which is a very non-Jewish thing to do, because we're supposed to read and question everything, especially reading the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Bible. But so it was a British school. It wasn't a Jewish school, but maybe it was a British school for the Jewish, the Israeli or a Jewish population. I don't know,
Right.
but so I think that maybe it was in English that he read that. But you've got to understand that a translation is only as good as the person translating it and their level of knowledge and their whatever biases, and I don't mean biases in a bad way. It's just you're biased by whatever knowledge and experience you've already had. So my uncle really wanted to be able to read whatever language he was looking at documents in, because he wanted to see it himself and not have it have been subject to somebody else's interpretation when they translated it. So that goes for, basically everything that was part of his research. So he learned a lot of Sumerian cuneiform and Egyptian cuneiform, a lot of these languages, so that he could look at the source and not just have to look at a translation.
Yeah. I tried finding the videos of the one particular person who is he's apparently a biblical scholar, but also was fluent in the cuneiform writing. And if I remember correctly, he had his big hang up with Zachariah's translation of the cuneiform language had to do with the Anunnaki and whether or not they were the shiny ones or the ones from heaven who came to earth. And it was basically that one particular issue that this guy had, and then he sort of based his whole debunking of Zachariah's research on, if that wasn't true, then the rest of it can't be true. But I mean, Zachariah wrote 12 books or 10 books, 9 books, I think, is the Earth Chronicles, and the amount of research, the amount of reading he must have had to do on those cuneiform tablets is immense. And so it seemed to me that it kind of fell a little bit short if he's just kind of saying one word was off and therefore the rest of it was off, when, he's got all these other translations that actually in the last book, Return to Eden, he talks about some of the at the time, the findings that science were finding were actually corroborating what he was translating from the ancient cuneiform tablets.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so did he teach himself? Did he go to school for that? How did he learn how to read the cuneiform writing?
It was all self-study. So his formal education was in finance. He went to the London School of Economics, and that's what his degree was in. And unfortunately, World War II interrupted his education, and he didn't go on to advanced degrees, but he certainly could have. And his self-study, was probably at that level with everything that he's done. So he did reach out to a lot of experts, but he was self-taught in those things.
Yeah. And didn't a few of his, he had kind of a core group of friends we'll call them, that would travel with him to all these areas. And didn't he have a few of those people that went on to be actually pretty fluent and pretty good at reading?
Yes. The University of Chicago has a program that includes, some of the ability to read ancient cuneiform and things like that. I don't know the names of the courses, but one of his friends from that time and travel took a lot of those courses and has been able to translate some of this himself also. There are not very many people in the world who have the ability to do that. But
yeah, and so Zacharia was taking some heat for his research, and it should also be noted that your father, Amnon Sitchin, he's a orbiting satellite physicist. The guy was incredible, and I've actually had him on as well. He did most of the calculations to figure out the orbit of the 12th planet, Nibiru. And
yes.
Did he get any flack for that? Did he get any sort of kind of institutional academia come down on him at all, or no?
No, I don't think during the time that he was working that people really knew that he had done that. I mean, I obviously the readers of my uncle's works, one of the books was dedicated to my father, and I think he was mentioned, in the sections that talked about some of the orbits that Amnon Sitchin had done the calculations or something along those lines. But I don't think people in my dad's circle at work knew about this. Now, since that time, my dad has had different discussions in his home or in his community to talk about the topics and to explain my uncle's theories and work. But that's a different story. So nobody's given him a hard time.
Yeah.
So.
Now, were you a child sitting around the dinner table with those two, listening to them just kind of babble back and forth about their research? I mean, it must have been quite a dinner conversation.
No, I mean, my uncle lived in New York and we lived in Michigan most of the time. And my dad would talk to my uncle in Hebrew, which I didn't understand. So no, I really wasn't listening in from the corner or anything like that. So no opportunities for that.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating because the level of research is just incredible in all of those books, and they've been translated in many different languages, right?
Yes, I don't even know how many, but I think at least 30 languages. So,
Yeah,
and even the book that we put together posthumously that I edited, which was different chapters of some of his other books and some articles that at the time hadn't been published elsewhere. That book has also been translated in probably at least 10 languages that I know about, because the publisher sends me, I don't think they send me every single one, but they send me copies of the international editions.
Yeah.
So,
and that book's the Anunnaki connection, right?
The Anunnaki Chronicles.
Chronicles, okay.
Yeah.
And refresh my memory. That is basically you're taking the research that didn't make it into his Earth Chronicles book and sort of made that into a book, or what
no,
subject?
That was we took selected chapters from each of the books, and we had some articles that hadn't been published before and some speeches that he'd given at conferences, and we put that in there too with some commentary before each section, and also preface and postscript to the book. And that came out in 2015, I think. So it's been out there for a while, and it's beginning to be, like I said, published in a lot of different languages as well. So the publisher sends them to me whenever they come out. I get a few copies from the different languages, but I don't think I get every single one that's out there. But I know there's a very large Italian following of my uncle's research. So it's been in Italian. It's published in Spanish. It's some Asian languages, I think Korean and Thai. So, and my uncle's books are in like 30 languages or more. So.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I wonder why Italians are. It's very popular with the Italians.
I don't know, but they have a very active group. So they've reached out to me for various things, and there's some Facebook groups that are discussion groups and things like that on my uncle's work. And there's one specifically that's an Italian group that, has, they've pinged me on Facebook.
Okay.
And
are they just sort of like book clubs, or are they actually going out there and kind of exploring as well? I mean, are these people finding things that are, that Zacharia had talked about in his books that are now kind of popping up, or what kind of groups are these?
So if they're not, I don't think they're doing research. There may be a few people that are doing some research or putting things together that post in them, but mostly it's just discussion. It's like, I have a question, or this struck me, and what do you think? And, those kinds of things. So, and sometimes they're posting when, if they're talking about water on Mars or something like that, they'll post some articles on things like that there, because they know that the other folks in those groups are interested.
Yeah. And are there things that are currently happening right now with the way space like exploration is right now, with all the billionaires helping out, and everybody seems to be going into space. The U.S. just launched the Artemis program, which is hopefully going to be putting another man on or woman on the moon here in the next 5 or 6 years. Are there things that are coming out now, research from space, that are providing more corroboration for what he was finding in the cuneiform writings?
I mean, there's a few things that are kind of curious. Other things seem to be shared by groups. I don't know how reliable they are. About structures on Mars, a cave of some kind that looks maybe like it's not a natural formation. There are scientific things that we're getting from NASA about evidence of having had water on Mars. There's things here and there, but I want to make sure that they're reliable sources, because my uncle was so determined to be accurate and not say something that was speculation. I'm trying to follow in his footsteps there.
Yeah, yeah. And what is the following like? How big is it?
It's still pretty large. I mean, there's still a very big group, and I think it's really even still a growing group. I don't think the people that have followed him for years, I don't think they've dropped off. Some are reading a few other authors probably as well, because they don't have Zacharia. But a lot of those other authors are standing on Zachariah's shoulders, which is as it should be. I mean, any scientific endeavor or discovery is going to be based on what came before and the ideas that help move things forward. So that's not surprising.
Yeah, yeah, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to reach out to you again, is because I've been listening to people like that and reading books, and her first name is Lynn, and she wrote a book called the Anunnaki Connection, not the Anunnaki Chronicles, the Anunnaki Connection, and she's kind of has been seen on television in some of these shows, and a lot of what she was saying was kind of running right parallel with what Zacharia had read in the cuneiform tablets. And the other one, I'm just gonna bring up his name so I don't butcher it here. But this is, and I told you about this in our pre-production. This gentleman's name is Paul Wallace, and he's a former Anglican minister, and he spent decades training other ministers about the Bible. So basically teaching the Bible to the church. And he had a great interview with a gentleman named Mauro Biglino, an Italian man who basically was, do you know who he is?
No, I don't.
Okay. He basically worked for the Vatican in terms of translating those ancient texts, and a lot of their conversation revolves around the word Elohim, and whether that's plural and all those sorts of things. And then Zacharia was the first one, as far as I'm concerned, that really talked about that based on the Mesopotamian writings that he was researching. So it's fascinating to start seeing it, and I wouldn't say mainstream because it's not mainstream yet, but I mean, these are some very, very guess, high up there in terms of biblical academia that are kind of saying the same thing that he did. And I think that's, I don't know if while he was alive, he was seeing that people were actually corroborating what he was saying. Do you know if that was the case at all, or was he just out there kind of just blazing a trail that was completely
I think he was kind of blazing a trail. I mean, there were the naysayers that, but like I said, he didn't pay attention to them. But there were things like when the Voyager spaceship went by, some of the planets, Uranus and Neptune, and they were exactly as Anunnaki described them. And they are planets that we can't see with the naked eye. So, the ancient people had no way of knowing that one was green-blue and one was blue-green. And when Voyager took pictures of it, it's exactly as the Sumerians described. So how could the Sumerians know it? The Sumerians knew it because the Anunnaki told them. And so some of those kinds of things my uncle had a chance to see during his lifetime, and it was really very gratifying to him to see those things rediscovered by science that the Sumerians had known.
Yeah, that's and I believe that was in Return to Eden, that one of the last books in the Chronicles where he talks about that. Did he ever go to? Well, they're all now in the museums, but did he ever go to the Baghdad National Museum?
I don't know if he had a chance to go to Iran or not. Probably at some point. It would have been at a completely different political time.
Yeah. Iraq before Saddam Hussein, I'm sure it was a lot more open to foreigners coming in. I was just curious to know because I read another amazing book, and as a matter of fact, I'm trying to get this guy on to do a podcast episode. He wrote a book called The Thieves of Baghdad, and it was all about the initial invasion into Iraq in 2003. Basically, as soon as Baghdad fell, that was one of the first buildings that got pillaged was the Baghdad National Museum, which housed all of those amazing ancient artifacts. And this gentleman was he ran the team of military officers, Marines, and actually I think they were police officers as well, because they were handling it as if it was a crime scene, but basically going in and trying to figure out where all this stuff went that was stolen. Because that apparently that museum was unbelievable in terms of the amount of ancient history and ancient artifacts that they had from that area, from ancient Mesopotamia. And so I was just curious to know if he had ever been into that museum before.
Yeah, I don't know. I did ask him once about what museum that he hadn't been to that he would like to go to, and he told me the Vatican. So he didn't mention the one in Iraq, which may mean that he'd already been there, or maybe the Vatican was still the top of his list. I don't know, but
yeah, I bet he would. I bet he would have a field day in the archives trying to figure out what they know about all this.
Well, I think he felt that there was a lot that they were keeping to themselves. So I think that was part of why he would really like to go there. They do actually have a whole department to study these kinds of things. And one of the trips that he went on, he was in Italy, and I think they went to Rome and visited places. But he had a long conversation with the representative from the Vatican at the time. I don't remember his name, but everybody else on the tour was sitting at the other table and, kind of listening in on the conversation. But it was basically, they were like-minded and talking about these things because the Vatican's position on this is that, God created man here on Earth, and why couldn't he have done it somewhere else too? So that's kind of their position. They're very open to the idea that there's extraterrestrial life. And whether they visited here or not, I don't know if that's in their discussion or public discussion, but definitely that there could be life on other planets. They're very open to that idea.
Well, and the fact that they have one of the largest telescope departments and telescopes in the world,
right?
So you kind of wonder what they're looking for out there.
Yeah, I think they know what they're looking for, but we don't.
Yeah. It's excuse me, that would have been a fascinating, conversation to listen to those two guys, because obviously in the face of it, the Catholic, orthodoxy doesn't want anything to do with this, but obviously they know something's up, because they wouldn't have these people there that think the same way as Zacharia did.
Right. Well, it's one thing to study it, and it's another thing to share that information or to be open about that. And you asked earlier about people being reluctant to associate themselves with this. A lot of those people that were advisors to my uncle or provided information may have been in academia or something along those lines, and they did not publicly want to acknowledge that they were sharing information with my uncle, or that they agreed with these ideas or things like that, because they were afraid of what their colleagues would say, and that it would be career suicide to do so. But privately, many scientists and educators and professors in colleges that helped my uncle supported these ideas, but they couldn't be public about it.
That to me is a complete shame.
Mm-hmm.
that they're willfully, that they're not actually teaching the whole story.
Yes.
It's just, I find that it's sad in a way, because they're even though they agree with it, they're keeping the official narrative alive by keeping a lid on that stuff, and that just keeps the rest of us dumb to the fact that there might be other explanations out there.
And I think we're getting to a point where people are more receptive to this idea. I think we've moved in that direction. I can't really tell you exactly what's happened along the way, whether it's scientific discovery that has these things, or just people are more open to this, but it's not so out there anymore. It's not necessarily mainstream at this point, but I think people are willing to listen.
Yeah. And then, just recently, I think it was 2021, the government came out with that report. It was only 9 pages long, but it essentially said that, there are things out there that we still can't figure out. So,
right.
Yeah, it's out there. It's just not being promoted, probably like some of us wish it would. Just based on the 4 or 5 years of reading that I've done, not only with him, but with kind of all the offshoots from him. It just, it adds a fascinating layer onto this whole thing. Are you, how, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but how involved are you? I know that you kind of do the website part-time, but in terms of the other stuff, do you kind of read a lot of this stuff yourself kind of on the side, or you just do the research and you just make sure the website's up and operational?
Probably more the latter one. I'm trying to look at things that I know are credible sources, and not, websites that I have no idea who's running them, or those kinds of things. So I read a little bit, but I'm probably not as well read on this topic as many other people are with newer discoveries or other authors that have something to say about it.
Do you feel comfortable maybe naming some of those sources, naming some of those names of people that way, like I'd love to look at something like that. Is that something you'd be open to?
I'm looking at things that might be in, mainstream media, the New York Times or Time Magazine, Newsweek, even USA Today or Wall Street Journal, or, those kinds of sources that might publish something that's explaining new scientific ideas, or things that NASA's publishing, or Science Magazine, those kinds of places, not, xyzwebsite.com, that I don't know who's behind it or where they get their information. I'm trying to look at something that are credible sources that would be fact-based.
The ones I've been kind of looking at, The Fifth Kind, this is Paul Wallace's, his channel, and then Gaia, there's a couple of others, and Again, they're not mainstream researchers, but they are doing some serious investigative research into this. At this point, if I hear it coming out of the New York Times or something along those lines, I kind of almost poo-poo it, because I know that because of their past actions that they're more inclined to downplay it as opposed to look into it.
That's true, but if it's published there, then there's something to it. It's not.
Yeah. And you know what? You're right, because in 2019, I think it was, that's when the New York Times came out with the article about the Navy jets, the jet footage, the pod footage of those aerial vehicles that nobody could figure out what they were. Yeah, they came out of the New York Times, and it was interesting because one of the authors of that article at the New York Times, I think, is big into this sort of thing. I think so. It was, yeah. And so in that regard, then yeah, if it's that mainstream, then it's definitely something that has been vetted. I would assume.
Right.
But again, that's my frustration with this, as I'm kind of diving deeper into it, is just that blanket disagreement, or that blanket just sort of, that's this stuff that's kind of way out there. We don't really think about it in that sort of way. That kind of bothers me.
Right.
And I'm sure it bothers all of his followers from that are still kind of keeping all of his research and his views alive. What is now? Do you have any the groups that you kind of keep in touch with? Do they have anything kind of coming up? Do they have any kind of interesting things that they're hoping to get out on the website? I mean, where are we standing with that? Are there people out there actually trying to come up with new content for the website, or is it more you're just trying to find as much of the old stuff as possible?
No, it's mostly, as far as website content, it's up to me to try to find something and put it up there, which is unfortunately why there hasn't been a lot of new content in a while. There are things that get posted in some of the Facebook groups, the Italian groups. One of them had a conference last spring, or I think it was last spring. So I think they have those sorts of conferences from time to time. There are other kinds of conferences that are not just Sitchin ones, but are maybe UFO or other kinds of things where there's discussions on these sorts of topics. But I'm not really plugged into all of those. Occasionally, I find out some of the groups that are having gatherings because they post more publicly about them, or the Italian group has reached out to me in the past about maybe recording something for them or something along those lines.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, it's I continue to gobble this stuff up as quickly as I can, and it's amazing. It's an amazing path to be going down, and like you said, it seems like there are a lot of things that are happening now as we step more into the future and into space. The more we do that, the more we're going to come up with evidence that is going to corroborate what he was saying back in those books were the 80s? He wrote those, the 70s and the 80s?
The first one, the 12th Planet, I don't remember if it was 1974 or 1976 that it was published, but somewhere in there. So I think it might have been 76. But so it's been a long time, and he researched that first one for a very long time before that first book was published. And then the other books, he had a lot of research and was able to kind of start publishing those every year or two for a while. But the first one it's been a long time, and it's still in print, which is very unusual. And it's still being translated into more languages. So
it's actually, let me ask you this before I get to that point. How long was he doing that for? How long was he involved in that research for?
So really his whole life. I mean, from the point where he had that incident in school where he asked about the Nephilim and was shut down, he was interested in this. I mean, there were a lot of other passages in Genesis, especially, that were very enigmatic and sparked his research. So that's when he started trying to learn other languages and look at the additional ancient texts and find out, well, who are the Nephilim? And, eventually he started calling them the Anunnaki because he found the Sumerian term for them. But, who were they, and looking at all of that. So it's really a lifetime of research. And he didn't start publishing in 1976. He would have been 46. Is it 46? 56. So 56. So he researched this for his lifetime and had an opportunity to really write when he was at the point where he was retiring and things were getting a little slower in his other work, and was able to start writing. And his wife was the one who said, stop talking, start writing. So and he did.
Yeah. And do you, as sort of the kind of the keeper of the information, do you have all that research? I mean, is that somewhere? All of his notes and all of that?
I have some of his notes. Unfortunately, when he passed away, his wife passed away first. And so he was living alone in his apartment in New York, and he had really two rooms that were his office. And one room was floor to ceiling books on bookshelves and piles of notes and other things. And the other office also had like correspondence and his slides that he used to do when he had presentations and all kinds of things. And unfortunately, a lot of that was thrown away. The family that was cleaning up the apartment afterwards didn't care about that. And one grandson saved a lot of things, but not nearly as much as I would have liked to have saved. I would have liked to have saved all of his books and had them be a library. Many of them are out of print. That there were things that he used in his research. And the slides, I would have liked to have had those to be able to continue to have discussions and maybe repeat some of his presentations. I don't know if I would have had all his notes and been able to do what he did, but I would have liked to have had those slides for things he thought were important artifacts and places. And absolutely. I do have the notes from the trips that he took and those notes that he gave to everybody who attended. And one thing I keep thinking of, when I retire or something, is maybe putting those together in a sort of book so that somebody could use them as a reference. I'm going to Baalbek. What am I seeing here? I'm going to this library in Germany. What am I seeing there? So.
That's actually a great idea. And I've got a friend who is Lebanese, and every time I see him, I say, I cannot wait to go to Baalbek. And he said, dude, you got to wait because it's a nightmare over there right now in terms of the politics and just the sort of social unrest. But that is definitely high on my list. And then I'll let you go after this. But the in his documentary, Why Jerusalem? Apparently, underneath the Temple Mount, underneath that main structure, there are megalithic stones like the trilithons at Baalbek that are kind of the base of the, which just tells me that base of the Temple Mount is a heck of a lot older than probably what the normal history says about it. So that sort of thing is what fascinates me.
Right. And that's actually something you can see almost every trip to Jerusalem. You can go on a Western Wall tour and they take you into that section and they make a point of showing you those stones. So, you see, and they're very large and they don't explain how they got there or anything about them, but they just explain how unusual they are. So,
they're like, this rock is massive. Let's move on.
Kind of. It's like not how did somebody place it here? And even if they say, like my father kind of joked, well, if they say they put it on a cart, well, and wheeled it around, well, how did they get it on the cart?
Yeah.
So, you had to lift it to get it on the cart, even if that's how you're moving it. So,
if you just go the 5-year-old questioning route, you stump them pretty quick. All right. So I gave the 12th Planet to my next door neighbors, and they're a young couple. I think he's just turned 30. She's like 27. And, one night we were around a glass of wine, and I was like, you guys got to read this. You got to check it out. And I give it to him, and she's like, Brian, I just couldn't get past when he started the calculations. And it was because it's basically like an astronomy class, the first couple of chapters of that thing. She's like, I couldn't get beyond that. So, I think at some level, you probably have to be, ready to sort of accept this information into your life. And they're too busy trying to figure out the world as it is now, let alone
what it was.
Yeah, exactly.
What I tell people, especially with that book, is that you have to get past the first 100 pages, and that might be a little difficult, and you may have to read just a few pages at a time and let it sink in and then read some more. But once you get past those 100 pages, it's just fascinating, and it's you don't want to put it down kind of thing. But again, you have to read it in small increments and think about it. But when I reread The 12th Planet, I just read it and it was fine, but maybe it's because I had been more versed in the topic at that point. But The 12th Planet was the first book that I read, and it did take some time to get past that 100 pages, and it was a little bit of a push, but like once you're there, you're there.
Yeah. And I totally agree. And again, they're busy kind of getting their career started, and, this might be not be the time in their life to do that, but, the information is there for anybody who wants to read it. And then what I always tell people is get as much information as you can about something. And then now that you're, well-rounded in terms of your information, then you can make a decision as to what you think is going on. So, I just thought that was an interesting point, and thought I'd bring it up. Well, listen, Janet, this was great. It was great to catch up. Again, I was really excited to talk to you just because of all the things I've been reading and kind of listening to. Every time I hear something that kind of corroborates where Zacharia was coming from, I always kind of think of you and think of, his books and all of those sorts of things. And so I'm very appreciative that you are around to still keep that stuff out there in the internet. And again, it's Sitchin.com. Get on there and, you can find a wealth of information. Just rifle through it and have a good time. And it's some amazing information. And as we move into the future, I think that information is going to be even more impressive because it was done so long ago.
Right.
So I really appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll have you on down the road when maybe something amazing happens out there with one of these rockets, and it really corroborates his research, and then we can talk more about it. But thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
All right. Hey guys, I'll finish it like I always do. If you're in the military, the police departments, fire departments, or first responders, if that's you out there, thank you for your service. Stay safe. Janet Sitchin, thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, guys, it's the Rain Man. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching Rain Man's Take, Observations of the World We Live in. If you like the content, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. You can also follow Rain Man's Take on Instagram at Rain Man's Take. Also, check out our website at www.rainmanstakepodcast.com and send your comments to rainmanstake@gmail.com. Keep an eye out for future podcasts, which will be coming out every Thursday at 5 p.m. West Coast time.